Yes, folks, the New Zealand EU Free Trade Agreement is full of holes. Like all free trade agreements, there are always strings attached. Now, take our free trade agreement with China, for example. That has allowed Chinese companies to buy up New Zealand farms, dairy companies, and meatworks. And it's allowed a flood of Chinese immigrants into New Zealand who have squeezed many New Zealanders out of the housing market, causing the present housing crisis. And you may also wonder why we're getting inundated with immigrants from India right now. Well, the answer is simple. New Zealand wants a free trade agreement with India as well. Anyway, today I'll start this off with Pinhead's article from the other day. Now, folks, I've posted a link to this article in the description below for those who missed it the other day. EU-NZ Free Trade Agreement. New Zealand is negotiating a free trade agreement with the European Union, one of the world's largest trading entities. We're aiming for a high-quality, progressive agreement with the EU's 28 member states. High quality means an agreement that opens up new export opportunities for our businesses, adds to the more than 620,000 New Zealand jobs that already depend on trade, and helps to deliver prosperity for all New Zealanders. For all New Zealanders except farmers. Now, I'll explain that a little bit later. Progressive means an agreement that sets a global benchmark on social and environmental priorities like climate change, gender equality, indigenous rights, labour standards, and sustainable and inclusive economic growth. So is this a free trade agreement or a climate change identity politics agreement? Anyway, now to the farmers.
Potential agreement could see a boost to vital sectors by lifting trade barriers such as customs charges.
The sectors that are going to benefit the most from the agreement are the following: motor equipment, machinery, chemicals, processed foods and services.
The EU Trade Commissioner says negotiations with New Zealand and Australia will benefit all parties.
These two countries are important friends and allies. They are part of this circle of friends who believe in good trade and in multilateralism, and it's also economically beneficial for us to have agreements with them.
But one expert says it could spark some concerns both here and within Europe. The French raised their concern when Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern visited last month, fearful of the impact on the agriculture sector.
Yes, of course they're concerned. The agricultural market in the EU is highly protected, whereas ours isn't. So why would they change that? And they're not going to change that. And the following clip endorses that.
I am very happy to be here today to talk about trade and our relationships here. Yesterday, as Minister Parker said, we were launching together the start of the free trade negotiations between New Zealand and the European Union, and that is a very good it's a good news. It's a good start. We aim to facilitate trade between us, of course, increased access to each other's market, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises.
So no Fonterra there. Now to what we will get.
Thank you very much for your time, Commissioner and Mr. Parker. My name's Adam Dalgleish. I'm a PhD student in applied ethics from up the road. Just popped in. Doing refugee studies. I'm not quite sure how I got to trade, but I do have an interesting trade question. So very recently in the sort of global sphere, there's been a bit of a shift and a bit of a barrier broken down between humanitarian aims and trade aims, with the World Bank giving or releasing many $1 million in loans to countries on behalf in order for them to meet the needs of refugees, in particular with the Jordan Compact. And the EU in particular has sort of trade negotiations where companies that are based in Jordan that employ refugees get trade concessions. Basically bridging that gap between humanitarian aims and trade aims. And I was wondering if there was any space within agreements such as these for New Zealand and the European Union, which have very similar values, to come together and have some humanitarian things fall out of it on top of the social and environmental aims of the agreement.
Thank you very much, and I can see that you follow these things very, very closely. Absolutely, we have this with Jordan, and I think that this is a trend that should be welcomed.
This is a trend that should be welcomed.
Because it's a way, as the minister said, that we are adapting to global change. We need to follow suit as well.
Again, we need to follow global change. Why?
Well, I would say that in the actual trade agreement, there would not maybe be these possibilities, but the trade agreement is one part of a bigger partnership that we have with each other, a partnership agreement, which is a more political agreement where we commit to cooperate on all kinds of areas defined by our politicians. It could be security, it could be environment, it could be...
Yes, and it could be mass immigration of refugees that Europe doesn't want to stop. Yes, they'll send them down here.
Innovation and research, things like that. There's absolutely space there to do joint things, and I know that my colleague, Commissioner Mimica, who is responsible for development assistance, will be coming here very shortly to meet with your foreign minister, and they will do a little Asia-Pacific tour to see how they can cooperate in that area. So that has obviously a humanitarian and development aspect. I think this is just the first tour to discuss how to work jointly. This is obviously an area that you know much better and where we are eager to learn from your experiences and knowledge here. So I think that there could be space to do this in a lot of different forums. As you say, we have such a strong common base on these values. So I mean, the sky is the limit.
Oh, the sky is the limit.
I would agree. We've got to be a bit careful that we don't expect trade agreements to take over the obligations of all the other parts of the multilateral system.
So you mean all the other parts of the global socialist agenda, don't you?
Whether it's on environment or refugee issues. It is, I do find it, it's actually something Vernon Small in my own office has said to me often, that there's a strange, almost hypocrisy in the argument that one of the reasons that trade agreements are evil, is that countries give up their sovereignty.
You finally got something right. Anyway, now for a bit of globalist creepy.
There is change afoot here that has focused the minds, I think, of those involved on the EU side, and we share the ambition that has been expressed by the EU, by the President, and welcome that level of ambition. The President's right, we discussed also climate change, we discussed our region, the Pacific. The EU already is amongst the top 7 in terms of aid and development support within our region, and we discussed how, within the context particularly of climate change, we can...
Yes, this whole agreement is about climate change.
And to continue to partner and work together as an institution and country with shared values and common interests. So overall...
Now this is the creepy bit.
Mr. President, I thank you for your...
God, she's sucking up.
Your enthusiasm, your warmth. I very much...
She's so creepy.
Enjoyed our dialogue, our exchange together, and your enthusiasm for our very proud nation of New Zealand.
Okay. I like the moment. I like New Zealand, although I was never there, but I have seen photos, I have seen movies, I have seen everything. But as the commissioners are traveling all the time instead of being here, Commissioner Hogan will go to New Zealand instead of having me going to New Zealand.
I pick up some jealousy.
Yeah. It's serious.
Yes.
I have a standing invitation from 170 countries.
Her stupid joke backfired. Yes, that woman is a complete embarrassment to New Zealand. And that's a problem with free trade agreements. They're made by bureaucratic globalists. That trade deal with the EU seems to be more about expanding the socialist agenda than anything else. Now, folks, on the comments page, you will notice the link to Cross the Rubicon's podcast. So I hope you get there and have a listen, etc.